Hey, everybody, and welcome to Olivia's Book Club, the podcast. And I am your host, Olivia Fierro, and very excited for this conversation here today. Because if you're a regular listener to the podcast, you've been watching or listening to these shows, you know that mainly I talk about fiction. It's what I read the most. It's what I enjoy the most. It's what fascinates me as these storytellers. But the book we're talking about today is called Tell Me Everything, The Story of a Private Investigation by Erika Krouse. And it is a true crime memoir, I think we can call it, that really reads like fiction, is very compelling and provocative and deep and painful at times, and also humorous. It's got so many elements that I just really wanted to be able to talk to the woman behind it. So joining me this morning is Erika Krouse. Congratulations on this Flatiron release, and I understand it's one of the Book of the Month picks and on, getting a lot of attention. So congratulations, and I can't wait for you to tell me, how did you pitch this book? Because it's a lot of things wrapped up in one.
Yeah. First, thanks for having me on your show, Olivia. I'm really excited to be here. And so pitching the book was really interesting because I'm not used to writing about myself at all. I'm traditionally a fiction writer. So we did a proposal because I was like, I'm not going to go through all this pain if it's not going to find a home. So I wrote a proposal, and the first two proposals I submitted to my agent, she kicked back because she said, if you're going to write a memoir, you actually have to be in the memoir. Because I just didn't even want to write about myself at all. So I had to sort of overcome that big hump. But then I was so intrigued by the case I'd worked on as a private investigator that I just really wanted that narrative to be out in the world. So I overcame my reticence and wrote the book.
Well, and the weaving of the two storylines essentially are both involving you, your perspective. Number one, your work as a private investigator working on a case. It looks into many cases of sexual abuse and sort of a toxic culture that does not allow for female students to really be safe on a college campus, largely because of the personalities that are driving the sports community, and in particular the football team, but then also weaving in your own experience as an abuse survivor and sort of finding your voice and your space to navigate through that pain, and how you confront it over and over again as you're talking to these women who have been victimized and silenced again and again. So first of all, when you first became involved in this, let me just, I guess I'll dial it back and say the way that you introduce yourself in the book is very intriguing, in that you describe your face as being both familiar and forgettable, and that you have this knack for people just opening up to you. So talk to me a little bit about how you became aware that this was something that didn't happen to everybody all the time.
It's happened to me since I was a small child. And I just thought I thought that's how people were. I thought you show up and they tell you all this stuff about them. And it usually it's not like a party thing. Well, it has happened at parties actually. But it's more like a one-on-one thing. I'm waiting in line at a bathroom, for a bathroom or at the grocery clerk or whatever. And people just say, they tell me about horrible things like deaths and divorces and, loss and grief. But it's almost like right after hello, they tell me these things often. And you probably, same thing might happen to you. I mean, I'm seeing you right now. You have the same kind of face, I think. I think it happens to a lot of people. But the thing that made the narrative strange for me was that I actually got a job out of it, right? So this lawyer just started opening up to me at a bookstore, and then he was kind of ashamed of himself for speaking so openly to me. And I said, that's okay. It just happens to me all the time. Please don't feel bad. It's my face. And he hired me on the spot. So I think there are a lot of people with this kind of face, it's like very easily forgettable. I remind everybody of someone they knew in elementary school. But I think the difference is that I was able to actually turn it into a job and make a sort of living off of being innocuous.
So you're talking about that, and as I was reading the book, I thought of my husband, because my husband is a retired police detective, sergeant, and had done a lot of sex crimes investigations through the course of his career. And he also has that characteristic where he says, we were out at whatever, and he goes, I guess I've got my priest collar on today because everybody's telling me everything, and it just makes him like, he doesn't ask anybody anything, and people tell him very much. So I was kind of
amazing.
Yeah, there was a familiarity there in terms of that just openness that you get loaded onto you, that you don't necessarily want to know everybody's darkest thoughts and and biggest troubles that are keeping them up at night. So that was that was very relatable from his perspective. But I want to talk to you about, so you had kind of described yourself, even though you were already a writer, as sort of flitting around in all of the jobs that you had done over your time. I mean, you've pretty much done everything. And it all builds up to what feels like the right thing, working as a private investigator. So for our listeners who haven't read the book yet, kind of set the scene for when this interaction happens with who we know as Grayson, the lawyer, and why in this moment in time you say yes to this.
So from there, we kind of hit it off, but I didn't do very well at the job. I didn't know what I was doing, and I really needed to learn the tricks of the trade of being a private investigator. So of course I said yes, because at that point I would have said yes to anything. I was really pretty broke, and I was working all these terrible jobs. I think at that time I was temping at a pharmaceutical company, but I had done every job like you've seen in the book. I mean, I read tarot cards in the street. I was dishwasher. I mean, I did everything. So I really would have taken almost any job offered to me at that point, but this felt like a strange fit, except it felt like a soul fit, but I didn't know what I was doing. So I really screwed up at first, and I really wasn't doing the job until this case came along. And when this case came along, it's almost like I found a niche that worked for me personally. In some ways, almost everything I had done up to that point and all my history, my own personal history, added up to make this both the best job in the world for me and also the worst job in the world for me.
It's the ultimate experience that would be described as triggering, because you are somebody who has gone through abuse, and you have some unresolved relationships and a lack of clarity or support in your personal life for what you've been through. And so you've got strained relationships because of that. And then you're sitting down with other women who have these painful accounts that they also need to share, but they're also kind of just surviving, and in some cases keeping their stories quiet just to survive and not lose everything. And that's a very relatable experience for you. It must have been extraordinarily painful, and it must have been something that you were hesitant about sharing in the book, I imagine, right? Because in this book, we're not only talking about the investigation that involves a college football team and the culture there on campus in Colorado, but also your own personal sort of plight to be heard within your family about abuse that you endured for years.
Right. It was very hard. I have to say my primary concern was for the survivors, because I didn't want to inadvertently out them or make their current lives difficult. Also keeping in mind that when they were attacked by this football team, they were young. They were technically adults, but they really were still kids. So all their involvement with this case was at a time when they were really still just out of their homes, really, and they were away from home for the first time and having to make very adult decisions very quickly. So I really wanted to be careful about that. And I would have these nightmares, and I wake up in the middle of the night and be like, oh my gosh, I forgot to disguise their hair color or their eye color or where they went to, where they came up in high school or something like that. So that was really concerning. Also, there was a big question for me about how much of my own story to tell. Again, I'm not really used to writing about myself. So, and there are all these concerns you have to bring in with that as well. So, and it was just plain hard too. And I knew that telling my story was going to separate me even further from members of my family of origin. So that was a decision. I was like, well, am I really willing to hammer the nail into those coffins, or and is it worth it so I can finally tell my story and be open about what had happened to me in context of this larger sphere of sexual violence.
Talk me through the generalities of the case and what it was that you were helping this law firm to discover, and to the dots that we were connecting, because it really was an innovative argument that, I mean, once you lay it out there, you say, well, how can you refute it? It's clear. But talk about what it was that you were looking for through the course of this.
Sure. Yeah. So back then, Title IX was about jerseys and facilities and money. It really, were the women's teams getting as much money as the men's teams, kind of thing in schools. But it wasn't about sexual assault at all. It had never been used for sexual assault. Now, of course, when you hear Title IX, that's what you automatically assume. But this was the very first time that any legal case had applied this to college sexual assault. So it was an innovative argument on the part of the lawyer who took the case. Ordinarily, it would just have been a criminal case. And I say just, I don't mean just. It's criminal rape is a horrible thing. But so the situation was that a female college student was gang raped by, we didn't know the exact number at that time, but five to eight unidentified college football players and recruits as part of their recruiting efforts and at a football. It was a party at her house that was supposed to be a girls' night in, but these players showed up, many players showed up, and these individuals made that choice to assault her. So she had tried to get this case tried with the DA's office, and the DA refused to do it, but instead said, you can do this civilly. You can take it to a civil a civil lawyer, but we won't try it criminally, based on what to me felt like excuses. It would have been a high profile case, and DA's offices, people don't know this. They have full discretion on what cases they prosecute and what cases they don't. And if it looks like the seat will be too hot for them, sometimes they just decide not to do it. So the case landed in our lap. And instead of just going after the players, the person I called Grayson said, I think we can make an argument that this is a discriminatory act on the part of the school, that they're not protecting their female students by setting firmer guidelines and making sure there are protective measures around the football recruiting process. So it was the very first time. So we didn't really have a map, and we were flying blind, and no one had ever thought of a school being responsible for sexual assault. What's that about, right? So it was very new.
And it becomes, of course, an all-encompassing mission, right? Mm-hmm. As you begin to put faces to these incidents, and you're speaking to these survivors, and you're understanding what they have had to endure, and then also not only the graphic nature of these assaults, but then also the quiet, demeaning moments where they have to just trudge on and continue on at campus in the environments with their attackers and abusers, and sort of are forced to kind of, how everything is fine, and what that does, like how this erodes these young women, and it's just an impossible situation. So it must have been, for you must have been raw and obsessed at all times while you were in the thick of this.
Yeah, also keep in mind that I was older than these people, so I felt kind of motherly toward them. And also coming from a family situation where I was alone dealing with my own trauma without support as well, to see the university, which is supposed to be kind of like a guiding, nurturing entity, a parental entity, really, to see the university casting these women aside as if their experiences didn't matter, and basically making them tough it out. And it wasn't, it wasn't minor for them. Some of them were receiving death threats from and they were afraid of this team of very large people whose sport is pretty brutal. So there was a lot of fear, I think, and a lot of intimidation. And then you add to that the additional situation, which is that members were actually targeting and harassing these individual women. then it becomes an impossible situation, I think.
It's a very just compelling and troubling look kind of at power dynamics in general, and about the power of money, and about, what fuels the motivations for these universities, and why these athletes are given carte blanche to behave in any way that they choose, based upon the money that the program brings into the university, and how the average student it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things when it comes down to those dynamics. I wanted to talk to you about, I know at the beginning of the book, and it's funny because I looked at it and said, nonfiction, kind of true crime memoir, I want to hear this. And then at the very beginning, you let the reader know that you've changed the names, as we've alluded to, of not only the university, but basically every player in this, right down to even the attorney who you were working with. How did you make that decision? Was that about just protecting the survivors of this assault? Was this a litigious concern? Were you afraid that about putting these names in here? And do you have any regrets about that? Because then at the end of this book, in this epilogue, it's maddening when we talk about the success of some of these people that we have come to despise through the course of this book, right? Whether it's because they just, shoved these complaints, whether they just allowed this stuff to go on. Many people who did the wrong thing at a variety of different turns are enjoying a life of success that is just, ugh.
Yeah, it's frustrating. It's so frustrating. I have very much of a whistleblower personality, so I would have loved to name every name and call out people because we're very careful about checking every fact. So if this were straight journalism, I would have actually had a duty to use every name. But because it's memoir, and I was talking a lot about feelings and going in a lot of different directions, it's the requirements a little different. But the decision to change all the names and not mention the university's name was 100% about protecting the survivors, because it's not just about protecting and disguising survivors. It's also, if you name their perpetrators, sometimes that identification can splash back on them and they can be implicated. Like, oh, I know something like that happened to you, and you went to that school, and you had mentioned that player. Does that you? So I really didn't want that to happen to anybody. I really did everything I could. While being honest, it was a conundrum, because I wanted to be as honest as I could, but I also wanted to disguise people who could be hurt. So it was a big migraine, total mental illness in itself.
Oh man. Well, as you weave and you really very effectively, I mean, the parallels of your own perspective and your own journey, trying to kind of get straight the relationships in your life, in the glare of the truth of what you've experienced, and with people who wanted to continue to deny your truth. And then telling these stories, these moments are, I mean, it works very well together for the reader to be in this space with you. What has been, and especially as the attention that this book will get, as I understand it, it's already, the rights have been purchased to try to put it into a television series or film. So what has been the personal implications for you about voicing your own story here in these pages?
It's a different way of walking around the world, to be honest. You get really used to secrets when you have them, and having them can even feel comforting, because it's the one thing you can control, perhaps in a situation where there was nothing else that you could control. So that's why I think one of the reasons that many survivors decide not to disclose or openly talk about what happened to them, because they were so disempowered in the moment. This is just the one corner that they can actually exhibit control on. But one thing I've learned is that the power of a secret is its secrecy, and that's not a power that you have as much as it is a power over you. So if you can let go of that, the small measure of power you get in control, in contrast with how much the power is controlling you, if you can kind of let that go and tell your secrets, it's strangely freeing. And the word empowering is really complex and has a lot of different meanings, but you really, there's a strength to it, I think, is a better way of saying it. Because if you can do that, what can someone else really do to you, right? You know, you've already been through this, that, terrible things, you know, and then you're no longer even holding on to the responsibility of what happened to you even too. So you're letting that float free in the world. It's different, and it's, you know, I have nightmares sometimes, and it's not easy. I'm not going to say it's easy. And for anyone who's contemplating doing it, I know there are costs to it, and I empathize with those costs because I feel them. But it's there's also quite a lot of new and interesting personal and emotional benefits that I never would have imagined before.
When you're accounting some of these interactions that you have as you're trying to kind of get to the bottom of what happened in these circumstances on and around this college campus, you lean on that ability that is natural to you, which is that people open up to you. But you also kind of talk through some of the skills that you develop and sharpen through the course of this, which is, you know, moments of silence and how uncomfortable that is for other people and how they feel them. And some of the ways that you're able to kind of assert your power and control when you're sitting across from a table of somebody who is still deciding how honest they're going to be with you. How was that journey for you? And I mean, is that something that you will always kind of continue to utilize, whether it's in determining your own personal feelings about people or developing stories, or you know, what can other people gain from being a little more tuned into how to get somebody to speak to you?
So there's two ways you can sort of go about it, right? You can go about it to manipulate people, which is something I absolutely did at that time. I tried to manipulate people into telling me things they didn't want to tell me, or that they only partly wanted to tell me. So you can use these little tricks, and I learned some of them on the job, but I also and I talk a lot about them in the book, right? Because I actually find it incredibly fascinating, all the ways we talk to each other beneath our words. But and I also learned a lot of those just growing up in a difficult circumstance. I was pretty desperate. I would do anything to get out of the house. I would do anything to get people to like me and invite me over and give me an escape. So I'm not alone in this. I know most people, we learn so much nonverbal communication. I think the percentage is like 80% of our communication is nonverbal. So you can learn those techniques both intellectually and also innately, and you can use them to manipulate people. Or you can also, and this is what most people do, we can use them to connect with each other, right? We can use them to become closer and more intimate with people we care about or want to get to know better, ways to have a more real conversation that transcends, hi, how are you? Fine, how are you? And I think that's something I'm going to continue to use those skills in that direction. I don't want to manipulate people anymore. I don't want to get them to tell me things. I don't want to invade their privacy anymore, frankly. But it is nice to have sort of that tool belt so that I can connect more strongly with those I care about. And that's important to me.
Well, and it's certainly understandable what the motivations are in those moments, because you're thinking of the greater good here, and you're going towards something that you want to be, what you perceive to be justice, whatever version that could be, the best version of that's available in these moments. And so it is, while manipulative, yes, it is. I mean, for a purpose of good. Which I'm sure, you know, you thought about and contemplated a lot as you were reflecting on this time in your life.
Well, thanks for giving me the benefit of the doubt, Olivia. Yeah, I mean, really, I was obsessed. It was an obsession. And the danger of obsession is you start thinking of the ends as justifying the means. And one thing we've learned over long period of evolution is that's such a slippery slope that if you go in that direction, you can go too far. And I felt like I went too far in that obsessive pursuit for justice, which really was, it was about the case. It was absolutely about the case, but it was also about me wanting some kind of justice for myself. And that's not fair. It's not fair to anyone I dealt with. I always thought that the subtitle of this book should be How I Became a Jerk.
and came back out the other end, right?
I hope I came back out.
So then I assume, Erika, especially with the publication of this book and the attention that it's getting, and I understand you already have another a work of fiction or a work of fiction in progress, I believe, right, for Flatiron, or is this going to be another nonfiction?
It's going to be a collection of short stories.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
So is the private investigator career for Erika done? That's in the past.
Well, yes, yes, for money, but every now and then.
I mean, I might do it for fun, but don't pay me.
I actually do sometimes, because a friend will say, "Hey, I have this crazy person stalking me, and I'll do a dossier on them," or someone else. Yeah, I remember someone else was like, "I'm trying to find my long lost sister, that I never met," that kind of thing. That kind of works so much fun, and I really like it. But I haven't had. I'd like to say it's over, but if I got the right case, I might. I'd have to do a lot of soul searching and set better boundaries for myself, so I didn't turn into the maniac I was before.
Oh. And another aspect of your life that you share a little bit in these pages is your passion for Jiu-Jitsu and mixed martial arts, and so is that still a part of your life? And that is it's. I mean, you were in some very serious battles. And
well, they felt serious to me because I was definitely outmatched. But I still practice martial arts. I do, I'll do karate by myself, etc. But I'm a middle-aged woman, so there's only so far I can really go there. It was a little handy though for the case, because if I was in a straight, I felt more comfortable to be in sketchier physical situations and meet with people that I might ordinarily be more afraid to meet with. That didn't mean that, that really only meant I had a very, very slight advantage over what I might ordinarily have. But yeah, I love the martial arts. I'll always do something.
To wrap up here, if you had to give a bit of advice or takeaway from what you learned, in particular through these courses of interviews that you did while working on this case, speaking to these athletes who just have at least many of them that you spoke to had such a warped perspective about, they're gods on campus, so therefore they could never be rejected. Therefore, it's impossible for them to, commit an offense or assault because, of course, everybody wants them. And then for, women who feel compelled to play their role in the system and not, cause any waves. Ultimately, did it make you feel hopeful that there are people in these groups that could be agents of change for the better, or did it make you feel hopeless that this is just a systemic issue that is never going to change?
I think it made me feel both things at different times, but ultimately I felt very hopeful. And the reason is that the women who came forward and the witnesses, they displayed uncommon acts of bravery. They risked everything, their own personal safety, their futures, their educations, everything that mattered to them, to make change. And they did make change. That's the amazing thing, is that it actually worked. And that, spoiler, anyone can kind of look up this case. So it's a little bit of, there's no real spoiler, but it changed things forever. It didn't mean that it eradicated sexual assault or these abuses on campus, but what it did mean is that the survivors now had a venue. They had a way to come forward. They had a way to speak their mind and tell their story and have a voice. And that, to me, gives me so much hope. I was just one player in this case, but I'm really proud of what we were able to accomplish. And I have so much respect for the main players, the plaintiffs and the lawyer who really made this happen, who made people, we don't even know how many women are safer now because of this. And what's more, whenever something does happen, there is a way for people to come forward now in a safer and more understandable way. And make change.
Well, Erika, thank you so much for speaking with me today, and there's this, it's a very powerful story, your own personal story and your own personal perspective as you navigated through this case, and revealing what goes on, and what can be done, at least to to bring some of these horrors to light, and maybe to protect other people, but definitely to give us a lot to talk about and think about. So the book is Tell Me Everything, the story of a private investigation. Erika Krouse, congratulations, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Olivia. This has been wonderful.
And today I'm very excited this week to have a special guest joining us for book recommendations. Hannah Makala is better known as the host of the Brunch Babes Reads book club, and she is a Tucson-based book blogger who you would know on social media as the Paperback Bruncher. And now I'm super hungry, and I'm thinking about, I don't know, omelets, or I don't know what I want to have for brunch. So Hannah, number one, what is your first pick for brunch?
I'm going to go a true millennial answer here and say some avocado toast. I know I'm going to get shamed for it, but it's delicious for a reason. It got popular for a reason, so that's going to be the answer.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I agree. That's very, very good. Or throw anything on that we can have, a little eggs Benedict maybe, and a little hollandaise sauce, and certainly a nice mimosa or a spicy Bloody Mary to discuss our favorite books.
Definitely. Or you can go a little spicy with it and do some like chilaquiles. Something like that is always a good choice.
Thank you for representing Tucson and Arizona well. Yeah, we got to give a throwdown to, or a shout out to, some Mexican food, because you've got great food over there. How did you start out this book club? What's the origination?
We started out as a brunch group, actually. So it was created by myself to make friendships in the Tucson area with local women, just have a way to kind of network, but also in a more personal and less business way. So it started there. And for about a year, we were just brunching and having fun. And finally, I was like, I think I'm ready to learn something. Maybe we need to fuel our brains as well as our bellies. And I started the book club from there. And 4 years later, the book club is going strong. The brunch club is a little bit less strong. The book club is even stronger, but they both have their strong selling points and are still going as today.
Well, and I think, as I'm sure you've experienced, when you made a switch to virtual conversations about books during the pandemic, it did actually probably allow you to broaden your reach, and it gives you a sense of connection to people when we really needed it the most. So now the challenge is just to keep it going.
Definitely. We have book club members from beyond Tucson up here in Phoenix now, as well as all over the world. We have some members that join in from Russia, so they'll join at like 3 a.m. It's pretty exciting. So I wouldn't change, the format change at all anymore. I love the Zoom.
Oh, that is so cool. Okay, so you have a couple of books that you are wanting to recommend to us today, to these listeners, and one will be what you're talking about with the book club next.
All right. So first up is a female queer author. Her name is Sydney Blondell. She's also an independent author. It's called Monarch. It's a collection of poems for National Poetry Month. It's actually her second. Both I highly recommend. They are just stories about the human experience. So it goes all over self-discovery, heartbreak, just kind of the seasons of life. And it goes through her changes of life, much like, the monarch butterfly itself. That's kind of the full tie-in there for Poetry Month. That's what we're reading right now, and I highly recommend it. It will definitely give you all the feels.
That is a solid recommendation. And it's nice because so many of us just don't read poetry, or don't read it with any consistency. Yeah. So I think that's kind of the greatest thing that you can do oftentimes for a book club, is to push somebody into a genre that they wouldn't be picking up.
Yeah, that's what we do every single month, actually. We read a new genre every single month just to try to challenge ourselves, get out of our comfort zones. Like I said earlier, the whole point is to learn something here and to find an experience outside your own. So we are constantly switching it up and trying something new.
Oh, I love that. Okay, and then one more recommendation from you today.
All right, it was our last month pick. It is called Small Favors. It's by Erin A. Craig. It's a prairie gothic young adult kind of fantasy, a little bit of horror. It's set in a small town called Amity Falls, and our heroine's name is Ellery, and she lives in this town where nothing happens. They're cut off from society until all of these strange whisperings of monsters in the woods start to happen. And they hear these stories of how their ancestries were also plagued by the same monsters, and nobody believes they're real until strange happenings start all over the town. So all sorts of crimes. And from there, chaos ensues. I don't want to spill too much. So all I will say is it's a little bit of a fairy tale retelling, but half of the fun is figuring out which fairy tale that is.
Wow, I love that. Oh, you did a very good pitch for this. So I never do the sci-fi or the fantasy, and I just kind of stumbled upon and listened to an audiobook, which was Light from Uncommon Stars. Have you heard of it?
It's that one. It looks pretty good.
Yeah, it's Rika Aoki maybe. And honestly, I was so spaced out on the day that I started to play it. I thought it was a nonfiction book about astrology. So I'm like, what in the world is happening right now? And it's like, thank you, NetGalley, because sometimes they just like stumble upon. And it was so wild and entertaining and surprising in so many ways that I was like, okay, this is not something that I would gravitate to, but I was like, I'm down with this. There's an outer space element. There's an evil actually representing needing to take souls down to hell, a storyline with classical music tied in, and it happens to play out in LA County near where I grew up, which was in Whittier. So they're at the Cerritos Mall, and they go to an Olive Garden there and some different things. So it was also a like, okay, wow, this is a lot of things that I was not expecting. So the beauty of those surprises, those genuine surprises that come sometimes from picking up something you haven't really researched is awesome.
I agree, especially in the audiobook format. I lean on my local library a lot for that because you can find the like amazing full cast ones or ones that it's basically a play in your ears. It has, soundtracks in the background and all sorts of amazing things. So it's exciting that you did an audiobook of that one.
Yeah, it was really, really fun. Hannah, so as you're looking ahead to the summer, do you slow down a little bit? Do you pick up with your reading? What's your approach as you're moving into like the next couple of months?
I mean, we definitely look to current events and try to stay, a little bit on trend and just read things that are relevant. Like in December, we read Mouse, and that ended up being one of, the banned books of the season, unfortunately. So we'll definitely keep our eye on, local news, national news, world news, and keep a pulse there. But we're also mood readers. So we're just going to have fun with it. If we do something really heavy and serious one month, we might opt for a romance the next month to give ourselves some recovery. So we'll see. It's all up in the air, but that's kind of the fun of it at this point. We'll do about a book a month.
That's great. Yeah, you got to kind of keep the emotions in balance, right? If we're going on a gut-wrenching journey, then you got to lift people back up again. We can only handle so much. So, and obviously, I imagine you have a lot of great people who are able to participate. It's kind of a little reader hotbed there. I just was kicking myself for not taking part in attending that Tucson Festival of Books. That looked like an amazing event.
It's such a cool experience because I mostly took off with all of my book things in the pandemic. So that's when I started my book talk, my TikTok account, and my Bookstagram over on Instagram. And I feel like I connected with so many amazing people, but all through the internet once again. So it was really exciting to go meet authors in person. I was definitely sweating and fangirling. I got some autographs. It was really fun, but the discussions themselves were just really awesome. The panels were great. I highly recommend it for anyone who's in Tucson in the spring.
Oh my gosh. Well, I make it a destination because that's the perfect time of year. And then we'll be requesting your restaurant recommendations, Hannah, and hopefully we'll be able to have brunch together. Awesome. Thank you so much for being my special guest this week with your book recommendations. You are an expert, and we're happy to bring some attention to your club and another way to get in on a great, stimulating conversation virtually from anywhere you are. Hannah, let us know where to find you on social media and all that.
So once again, I am on TikTok and Instagram on my personal book accounts, which is the Paperback Bruncher. And then you can find the book club over on, of course, Goodreads, Facebook, and Instagram at Brunch Babes Reads.
Thanks for listening to Olivia's Book Club, the podcast. I'm your host, Olivia Fierro. Our producer is Margaret Stewart. Our editor is Nick Sanchez. You can send us an email with your thoughts or your book recommendations. Olivia's Book Club at azfamily.com is the address. And you can check out Olivia's Book Club on Facebook or find us on Instagram. Hello, Bookstagrammers, at olivias.bookclub. And Margaret is at Overbooked and Overdue. Make sure to rate and subscribe to this podcast and tell your friends. You can find us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and Amazon Music.